Have you ever believed so deeply in your company that you'd bleed for them? That's exactly what I did for 8 years. But what happens when that loyalty gets rewarded with betrayal at the worst possible moment? My name is Alexandra Price, and I'm about to tell you a story that'll make you question everything you think you know about corporate loyalty. Picture this: you're in the middle of defending your company in a $450 million lawsuit that could destroy everything they've built. And they fire you. Over Zoom. In a courthouse hallway. Think that's impossible? Keep reading. For 8 years, I'd been the courtroom gladiator for Grayson Dynamics, Chicago's biggest construction firm. While other attorneys chased billable hours at white shoe firms, I bled corporate blue for Mason Drake's empire. Late nights, weekend emergencies, family dinners sacrificed, I was their legal Swiss Army knife. The Grayson headquarters towered over the Chicago River like a steel monument to old-school American grit. Mason Drake built this company on handshake deals and backbone, or so the company legend went. His right-hand man, Cliff Hargrove, had recruited me straight from Northwestern law with promises of real impact and family values. I bought every word. My corner office overlooked the river, filled with championship boxing gloves from my college days and photos of courtroom victories. Trophies of battles won for Grayson. Each win strengthened my belief that I was exactly where I belonged. Then came the call that would test everything I thought I knew about loyalty. Alexandra, we need you in the war room. Now. Cliff's voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. I grabbed my jacket, not knowing I was walking into the fight that would define my career. But here's what I want you to think about as we dive into this story. What would you do if everything you believed about loyalty was about to be shattered? The war room buzzed with tension thick enough to cut. Mason Drake paced behind the mahogany conference table, his silver hair disheveled, a rare crack in his usually pristine armor. Cliff sat rigid, scrolling through his tablet with the focused intensity of a bomb disposal expert. Gentlemen, Mason's voice carried the weight of impending doom, we're looking at extinction. The papers spread across the table told the story, a $450 million class action lawsuit. Faulty steel in 12 major construction projects. Foundations cracking. Buildings compromised. The kind of legal nightmare that could bury a company overnight. Brookfield, Watson and Associates filed yesterday, Cliff explained, sliding the complaint toward me. They're claiming systematic negligence, cover-ups, falsified inspection reports. They want blood. I scanned the document, my trial attorney instincts kicking into overdrive. The plaintiffs' list read like a who's who of damaged property owners. The allegations were serious, but I'd seen worse. Much worse. This is winnable, I said, looking up at both men. The steel supplier has deeper pockets than us. We shift liability, challenge their expert witnesses, and, no. Mason's interruption hit like a sledgehammer. We fight this head-on. Grayson Dynamics doesn't run from fights. His eyes locked with mine, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. Desperation. 3 weeks later, I stood in the federal courthouse lobby, adjusting my lucky tie, the navy blue one I'd worn to every major victory. The marble floors echoed with the footsteps of lawyers, journalists, and corporate executives gathering for what the Chicago Tribune called the trial of the decade. Judge Patricia Winters had a reputation for running a tight ship. No grandstanding, no theatrics, just cold, hard facts presented with surgical precision. Exactly the kind of courtroom where preparation mattered more than charm. I'd spent 72 hours straight preparing, fueled by coffee and the certainty that this case would make or break my career. The evidence boxes stacked in my hotel room told a story of meticulous construction standards, rigorous testing, and one very convenient scapegoat. The steel supplier who'd mysteriously filed for bankruptcy protection just days before the lawsuit dropped. Across the courtroom, Colby Nash adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and reviewed his opening notes. Nash, Reynolds and partners didn't take cases they couldn't win. Colby's reputation preceded him: brilliant, ruthless, and utterly uncompromising. He'd built his career destroying companies like Grayson. But I'd built mine defending them. As Judge Winters called the court to order, I felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with battle. This was where I belonged, where 8 years of loyalty would finally pay dividends. I had no idea that in 72 hours, everything would change. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," I began, my voice carrying across the silent courtroom, "this case isn't about a construction company cutting corners. It's about opportunists exploiting a tragedy to line their pockets." I'd learned long ago that opening statements were about emotion as much as facts. The jury needed to see Grayson Dynamics as the victim, not the villain. I painted a picture of a family-owned business built on 3 generations of honest work, now under siege by lawyers smelling blood in the water. Colby Hartman's opening countered with laser precision. He spoke of systemic failures, of profit margins prioritized over public safety, of internal emails discussing acceptable risk tolerances. His presentation was flawless, methodical, devastating. But I'd seen his type before. Brilliant prosecutors who forgot that juries were human beings, not computers processing data. The first week belonged to the plaintiffs. Colby paraded a stream of engineers, safety inspectors, and property owners before the jury. Each witness chipped away at Grayson's reputation with surgical strikes. Steel samples that failed stress tests. Inspection reports with suspicious gaps. Building owners facing millions in repair costs. I cross-examined each witness with the precision of a master surgeon, finding the small inconsistencies, the gaps in their expertise, the alternative explanations that reasonable doubt was built on. By Friday afternoon, I could see doubt creeping into some jurors' eyes. Then Colby dropped his bombshell. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Mason Drake to the stand." Mason Drake's testimony was supposed to be a formality. 15 minutes of corporate responsibility, expressing concern for affected families, reaffirming Grayson's commitment to safety. Standard CEO damage control. Instead, it became a masterclass in corporate self-destruction. Colby Hartman circled Mason like a shark sensing blood. Every question was a trap, every answer a potential noose. Mason's confidence, so commanding in boardroom meetings, crumbled under the fluorescent lights of cross-examination. "Mr. Drake, are you familiar with this email from your head of quality control?" Colby displayed a document on the courtroom monitors. "The one that reads, Mason, we need to discuss the Riverside project. The steel samples are showing stress fractures we can't ignore." Mason's face went ashen. I felt my stomach drop. This email hadn't been in discovery. How had Hartman obtained it? "I receive hundreds of emails daily, Mr. Hartman. I can't be expected to." This email is dated 3 weeks before Grayson signed off on the Riverside project. Your signature is on the final approval documents. The courtroom fell silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens. I scribbled notes frantically, trying to formulate a strategy for redirect that could salvage this disaster. "Mr. Drake," Colby continued, his voice soft but deadly, "did you knowingly approve the use of substandard steel to maintain your profit margins?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Mason looked directly at me, his eyes pleading for rescue. I was already on my feet, objecting, but the damage was done. I ducked out of the courtroom during the lunch recess, my mind racing through damage control strategies. Mason's testimony had been a disaster, but not fatal. I could rebuild credibility through expert witnesses, shift focus back to the steel supplier's role, maybe even turn Colby's aggressive tactics against him. My phone buzzed with an urgent calendar notification, leadership call, 1:30 p.m., urgent. I found a quiet corner in the courthouse hallway and opened my laptop. The video call connected immediately, revealing Mason Drake and Cliff Hargrove sitting in the familiar mahogany conference room. Both wore expressions I'd never seen before, cold, calculated, final. "Alexandra," Mason began, his voice devoid of the warmth I'd known for 8 years, "we've made the difficult decision to bring in fresh counsel. We need you to step aside. Effective immediately." The words hit like a physical blow. I gripped the laptop harder, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Cliff leaned forward, his country club tan looking sickly under the conference room lights. "It's not personal, Alexandra. We just need a different approach. A different presence in court." Different presence? My voice echoed in the empty hallway. "I'm 3 weeks into defending your company in a $450 million lawsuit, and you want me to just walk away?" "Our national firm is taking over," Mason said, not meeting my eyes through the screen. "Steinberg, Bennett and Associates. They have more experience with cases of this magnitude." The irony wasn't lost on me. They were firing me in the hallway of the courthouse where I was literally fighting for their survival. "Mason, you can't just..." The screen went black. They'd hung up. I stood there, laptop balanced on my knee, watching my reflection in the dark screen and wondering how 8 years of loyalty could evaporate in 60 seconds. I walked back into that courtroom carrying the weight of betrayal, but also something else, a technicality that Grayson's panic had overlooked. I was still officially counsel of record. Court protocol demanded proper paperwork to remove an attorney from an active trial. Forms had to be filed, judges had to approve substitutions, new counsel had to formally enter appearances. The bureaucracy that usually frustrated lawyers had just become my lifeline. Judge Winters noticed my return. "Mr. Price, are you prepared for redirect examination?" "Yes, Your Honor." My voice was steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Colby Nash watched me with curious eyes. During the break, courthouse gossip had spread like wildfire. Everyone knew about Grayson's attempted coup. Yet here I was, still standing, still fighting. I approached Mason for redirect examination, and for a moment, our eyes met. He looked surprised, confused, maybe even guilty. "Good. Mr. Drake," I began, my voice carrying new authority, "you mentioned receiving hundreds of emails daily. Can you walk the jury through your standard email management protocol?" For the next 20 minutes, I methodically rebuilt Mason's credibility. I highlighted the company's safety initiatives, the independent inspections, the industry standard protocols that Grayson had not only met but exceeded. Colby's head of quality control email became an example of corporate diligence, not negligence. A CEO reviewing potential concerns before making informed decisions. By the time I finished, Mason looked almost grateful. Almost. After court adjourned, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Impressive. "We need to talk." CN, Colby Nash wanted to meet. The hotel bar was nearly empty at 9 p.m., just a few traveling executives nursing whiskey and regret. Colby Nash sat in a corner booth, still wearing his courtroom suit but with his tie loosened, the first crack I'd seen in his professional armor. "You could have walked away," he said as I approached. "Most attorneys would have after what happened today." I ordered a beer and studied my opponent. Up close, Colby looked younger than his courtroom persona suggested, maybe early 40s with premature gray at his temples. His reputation for ruthlessness preceded him, but his handshake was firm and honest. "I'm still counsel of record," I replied. "Walking away would be abandoning my client." "Even after they fired you over Zoom?" Colby's question carried no mockery, just professional curiosity. "Especially then." He nodded slowly, taking a sip of his bourbon. "Steinberg, Morrison pulled out this afternoon. Conflict of interest. Turns out they represent the steel supplier in another matter." The news hit like a chess piece falling into place. Grayson's brilliant strategy had just imploded, leaving them with exactly what they'd tried to eliminate, me. "So you're stuck with the guy who's not the right face for the trial," I said. Colby almost smiled. "Between you and me, Alexandra, can I call you Alexandra? You've got exactly the right face for this trial. Your redirect examination this afternoon was masterful. You turned my best moment into your advantage." "Just doing my job." "No," Colby said, leaning forward. "You're doing something rarer. You're fighting for principle, not just profit." He stood to leave, dropping a 20 on the table. "See you tomorrow, counselor. May the best argument win." As I watched him go, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about winning anymore. But here's where I need to pause for a second. If you're still with me on this wild ride, and trust me, we're just getting to the crazy part, hit that like button real quick. I see you reading, but are you really invested in how this turns out? Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time because this story is about to take some turns you won't see coming. Now, back to the courtroom battle that would change everything. Friday morning brought Grayson's counterattack. My phone exploded with calls from Cliff Hargrove, demanding I step aside for their new strategy. The irony was delicious. They needed me to voluntarily withdraw since their first plan had collapsed. I let every call go to voicemail. In court, I called our first expert witness, Dr. Eugene Blackwood, a metallurgist with 40 years of experience and the personality of a university professor. Academic types often struggled with juries, but Eugene had something special, the ability to make complex science accessible. "Dr. Blackwood," I began, "can you explain to the jury what happens when steel is subjected to atmospheric corrosion over time?" For the next 2 hours, Eugene walked the jury through Metallurgy 101. Steel composition, stress testing, environmental factors, industry standards. More importantly, he explained how the steel supplier's product had contained undisclosed impurities that accelerated corrosion rates. Colby's cross-examination was surgical, but Eugene held his ground. Every attack was met with scientific facts, peer-reviewed studies, and 40 years of professional credibility. But Colby saved his best shot for last. "Dr. Blackwood, isn't it true that you've been retained as an expert witness in 17 cases involving this same steel supplier?" Eugene's pause was barely perceptible, but I felt it like a seismic shift. "That's correct. And in each of those 17 cases, you testified that the steel supplier was at fault, not the construction company?" The implication hung in the air, professional witness for hire, testimony for sale. Eugene straightened in his chair. "Mr. Hartman, in each of those 17 cases, the science led to the same conclusion. The steel was defective." As court adjourned, I caught Colby's slight nod of approval. He'd landed a hit, but not a knockout. The real battle was just beginning. Weekend preparation took on new urgency. With Grayson's leadership in open revolt and my employment status in limbo, I had to assume this was my last chance to present their defense. Every piece of evidence had to count. I spread the case files across my hotel room floor, looking for the thread that would unravel Colby's perfectly constructed narrative. Somewhere in these thousands of pages was the key to reasonable doubt. I found it in a stack of insurance documents. The steel supplier, Redgate Steel Works, had purchased a $50 million liability policy just 3 months before delivering the first shipment to Grayson Projects. Standard business practice, except for one detail. The policy specifically excluded coverage for known material defects in products delivered. Why would a company purchase insurance that wouldn't cover their main product unless they knew problems were coming? Monday morning, I called my investigator with new marching orders. By Wednesday, I had Meridian's former quality control manager on a plane to Chicago. By Friday, I had testimony that would change everything. Your Honor, I announced, the defense calls Patricia Kowalski. Colby's head snapped up from his notes. This witness wasn't on any list. Patricia Kowalski was 63, gray-haired, and carried herself with the dignity of someone who'd worked with her hands for 40 years. Her testimony was devastating in its simplicity. Ms. Kowalski, I asked, were you present during the stress testing of the steel shipments delivered to Grayson Dynamics? Yes, sir. I supervised those tests personally. And what were the results? Patricia looked directly at the jury. The steel failed. Every single sample. The courtroom erupted. Judge Winters gavelled for order. Colby's perfect case had just developed a crack. Did you report these failures to Redgate's management? 3 times. They told me to revise the reports. The smoking gun had just fired. Colby Hartman's objections came fast and furious, but Patricia Kowalski's testimony stood like bedrock. Cross-examination revealed a woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain by telling the truth. She'd been laid off when Redgate filed for bankruptcy. Her pension evaporated with the company's assets. Ms. Kowalski, Colby pressed, isn't it true you were terminated for falsifying quality control reports? I was terminated for refusing to falsify reports, Patricia shot back. There's a difference. Her personnel file, subpoenaed that morning, supported her version. 40 years of exemplary service, terminated 3 days after filing her 3rd complaint about the Grayson steel shipments. The jury was riveted. This wasn't abstract corporate malfeasance anymore. It was human drama, betrayal, cover-ups exposed by a grandmother who'd had enough. During the afternoon break, Cliff Hargrove cornered me in the courthouse hallway. What the hell do you think you're doing? His country club composure had cracked completely. This woman's testimony implicates us too. We could be looking at criminal charges. No, I replied calmly. Her testimony shows Grayson was deceived, just like everyone else. We're victims here, Cliff, not conspirators. Mason wants you gone. Today. We'll pay you triple your salary to walk away and let Steinberg, Bennett take over. I studied his desperate face, seeing the real Cliff Hargrove for the first time, not a mentor, but a corporate climber terrified of losing everything. Then Mason should have thought of that before trying to push me aside. I walked away, leaving Cliff sputtering in the marble hallway. For the first time in 8 years, I was calling the shots. But I could feel the walls closing in. Grayson's leadership was panicking, making desperate moves that could sink us all. I had 3 days to present the rest of our defense. 3 days to save a company that no longer wanted saving. My closing argument was scheduled for Thursday morning. Wednesday night, I sat in my hotel room, surrounded by legal pads covered in notes, possible themes, persuasive phrases that might sway a jury toward reasonable doubt. But as I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, I realized this case had become about something larger than Grayson Dynamics survival. It was about the difference between justice and revenge, between accountability and scapegoating. Colby Nash had built a compelling narrative: big corporation cuts corners, people get hurt, corporation must pay. Simple, clean, emotionally satisfying. My job was to complicate that narrative without defending the indefensible. I decided to structure my closing around 3 simple questions. Who knew what? When did they know it? And what did they do with that knowledge? The answers would paint Grayson not as villains, but as fellow victims of Redgate Steel's deception. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood. I dressed carefully in my lucky navy suit, the one I'd worn for every major victory. Win or lose, this would be my masterpiece. In the courthouse lobby, I spotted Colby Nash reviewing his notes. He looked up as I approached. "Ready for battle?" he asked. "Always." "For what it's worth," Colby said quietly, "you've fought honorably. Whatever happens today, you should be proud." Coming from an opponent of his caliber, the compliment meant everything. As I entered the courtroom, I noticed Mason Drake and Cliff Hargrove in the front row, their faces masks of barely controlled panic. Time to give them something to really worry about. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the silent courtroom. 3 weeks ago, you heard Mr. Nash tell you this case was about corporate greed. About a company that chose profits over people. I paused, meeting the eyes of each juror. Today, I'm here to tell you this case is about something else entirely. It's about deception. It's about a company that trusted the wrong people and paid the price, just like you might. For the next 90 minutes, I methodically dismantled the prosecution's narrative. I didn't defend Grayson's mistakes, I acknowledged them. But I separated negligence from malice, errors from conspiracy. Patricia Kowalski's testimony became my cornerstone. Meridian Steel had deliberately deceived everyone: Grayson, the building owners, even their own employees. The real villain wasn't sitting in this courtroom, it was hiding behind bankruptcy protection. Mr. Nash wants you to believe that Grayson Dynamics should have known the steel was defective, I continued. But how could they know what Meridian Steel's own quality control manager was forbidden to report? I walked the jury through the timeline, the failed tests, the falsified reports, the insurance policy that proved Meridian knew exactly what they were selling. Grayson Dynamics isn't perfect, I concluded. They trusted when they should have verified. They relied on experts who betrayed that trust. But being deceived isn't the same as being negligent. And sometimes, the real villains are the ones hiding behind bankruptcy protection while pointing fingers at everyone else. I could see doubt flickering in several jurors' eyes. Not enough to guarantee victory, but enough to know I'd given Grayson a fighting chance. As I sat down, I noticed Mason Drake watching me with an expression I couldn't read: respect, maybe, or calculation. Even now, he was figuring angles. Colby Hartman stood for his rebuttal. His closing was masterful, passionate, everything I'd expected. But I'd planted the seeds of reasonable doubt. Now we waited. Jury deliberations began Friday afternoon. In most trials, lawyers use this time for post-mortem analysis, reviewing what worked and what didn't. But this trial was different. This trial had become personal. I spent the weekend in my hotel room, avoiding calls from Grayson's leadership and preparing for either outcome. Victory would vindicate 8 years of loyalty. Defeat would end my career with the company that had fired me via Zoom. Monday morning brought no verdict. Tuesday stretched endlessly. By Wednesday, the courthouse buzzed with speculation about a hung jury. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Mason Drake. "Alexandra," his voice carried an edge of desperation, "regardless of what happens with the verdict, I want you to know we were wrong. The firing, the way we handled it, it was panic, not principle. Save it, Mason. I'm serious. When this is over, we'd like to discuss your future with Grayson. Partnership track, significant raise, whatever it takes. The irony was bitter. 3 weeks ago, I would have done anything for that conversation. Now it felt like too little, too late. Let's see what the jury decides first, I replied. Thursday morning arrived with gray clouds and nervous energy. At 10:15 a.m., Judge Winters received word that the jury had reached a verdict. As we assembled in the courtroom, I caught Colby Hartman's eye. He nodded slightly, professional respect between worthy adversaries. The foreman stood, holding the verdict form like a death sentence. In the matter of Brookfield versus Grayson dynamics, we find the defendant. The pause felt eternal. Not liable. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Relief, disbelief, celebration, outrage, every emotion crashed together in a wave of sound. I had one. The courthouse steps buzzed with reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, lawyers making statements. Mason Drake stood at the microphone, praising Grayson's legal team while carefully avoiding my name. Cliff Hargrove worked the crowd, spinning the victory as vindication of the company's values. I slipped away during the media circus, needing air that wasn't poisoned with political spin. The verdict should have felt triumphant. 8 years of loyalty had culminated in the biggest win of my career. I'd saved Grayson Dynamics from a $450 million judgment and proved that sometimes, justice actually worked. Instead, I felt empty. In my hotel room, I poured a bourbon and stared at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in those glass towers, Grayson's executives were celebrating their survival while calculating how to quietly push me out now that the crisis had passed. The Zoom firing had revealed their true colors. The victory hadn't changed anything fundamental. My phone buzzed with congratulatory texts from colleagues, friends, even former law school classmates who'd seen the news. But the message that mattered came from an unexpected source. Exceptional work. Would you be available for dinner tomorrow? I have a proposition. Colby Hartman wanted to meet. Not for drinks between opposing counsel, but for something else entirely. I typed back a single word, yes. Outside my window, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of possibilities I'd never considered. 8 years of loyalty had taught me a hard lesson. Sometimes the best way to honor your principles is to find people who share them. Tomorrow would bring new choices, new opportunities, new definitions of what loyalty actually meant. Tonight, I'd won the biggest case of my career for a company that had fired me over Zoom. The irony was perfect. The restaurant was understated elegance, the kind of place where Chicago's legal elite made deals that shaped the city. Colby Hartman sat at a corner table, no longer the courtroom predator but a successful attorney with something important to discuss. You know, he said as I joined him, in 20 years of practice, I've never seen anything like what you did. Most lawyers would have sabotaged their client's case after that Zoom call. You fought harder. It was the right thing to do. Exactly. Colby leaned forward, his expression serious. That's why I'm here. Hartman, Reynolds and Partners is expanding. We need someone who understands that practicing law is about more than billable hours and profit margins. The offer he laid out was intriguing, though not without risk. Partnership consideration, not guarantees. Cases that mattered, clients who valued integrity over expedience, but I'd have to prove myself first. But why me? I asked. You just spent 3 weeks trying to destroy my client. Because you fought back honorably. Because you stood your ground when they tried to cut you loose. Because you proved that some principles can't be bought. He paused. But Alexandra, I'm not offering you a free ride. We've got a pharmaceutical whistleblower case that'll make this trial look like small claims court. If you can handle that, then we'll talk partnership. His honesty was refreshing after 8 years of corporate doublespeak. His words echoed thoughts I'd been wrestling with since the verdict. Grayson's executives had already called twice, offering partnerships, raises, corner offices, anything to keep their miracle worker happy. But their offers felt hollow, tainted by the memory of that Zoom call. When do you need an answer? I asked. Take your time. But Alexandra? Colby extended his hand across the table. Some fights are worth losing the war for. You proved that this week. I shook his hand, feeling something shift inside me. For 8 years, I defined loyalty as unwavering service to one master. But maybe loyalty meant something bigger. Fighting for justice, integrity, and principles that transcended any single employer. 3 days later, I walked into Grayson's headquarters one last time. Mason Drake's smile faltered when I declined his partnership offer. I don't understand, he said. After everything we've been through together. After everything we've been through, I replied, I've learned what loyalty really means. 6 months later, my new business cards read Alexandra Price, Associate, Hartman, Reynolds and Partners. The partnership would come after I proved myself on the pharmaceutical case. Because sometimes the best way to honor your values is to find people who share them. And sometimes getting pushed aside over Zoom is exactly the wake-up call your career needed. I fought for a company that would have let me drown, and won. But winning taught me something more valuable than any verdict. Loyalty without respect is just servitude. The real victory wasn't saving Grayson Dynamics. It was finally learning to save myself. So there you have it, the story of how getting fired over Zoom during a $450 million trial became the best thing that ever happened to my career. If this story moved you, taught you something, or just kept you on the edge of your seat, I'd love to hear from you. Hit that like button if you believe that sometimes loyalty needs to go both ways. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by how their employer treats them. And drop a comment below. I want to know, what's the most dramatic workplace betrayal you've ever experienced or witnessed? If stories like this resonate with you, consider subscribing to my channel. I share real stories about justice, integrity, and what happens when ordinary people find the courage to stand up for what's right. Because sometimes the most powerful victories come from the battles we never expected to fight. Until next time, remember, your principles are worth more than any paycheck. And sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming the person they wish they'd never let go.